some folks come. And I think we're ready to go. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Glennallen's first community wildfire protection meeting. My name is Jenny Mosier. I'm a wildland firefighter at Valdez Copper River Area Division of Forestry. Thank you for taking the time to attend tonight, and thank you to the Glennallen School for allowing us to hold a meeting here. A couple of housekeeping things. The room that we're in at the school, there's an exit at the back of the room, and either direction you go down the hall will take you to the outside exits. There's also restrooms if you turn to the left down the hall. For those attending in person, we do have funding written into the grant to provide refreshments, which will be available after the meeting. I want to thank Sarah Nelson, who's in the back, for providing those. I'm going to turn it over to Emily, our co-host, to give our online attendants some tips for a smoother meeting.
Hi, thank you everyone. My name is Emily Yortstorp, and I am hired on as the Community Wildfire Protection Plan Project Coordinator. Thank you so much for being here. So I'll be monitoring the online presence and participation. Please make sure you are muted. And then when you are ready to talk, please go ahead and unmute yourself and then mute again when you are finished. There's a chat box located at the bottom of your screen. If you have any comments or questions that throughout the meeting, please feel free to type them there. Again, I will be monitoring that. To raise and lower your hand, you can click the more option and you will see it there. Your screen may also say reactions, and you can find the raise and lower your hand there as well. We encourage everyone's participation, both online and in person, as community wildfire protection plans cannot be written without your input. Thank you again for being here.
And finally, as we get started, I want to let our in-person attendants know that we are using a PA system to assist with the sound quality for both our in-person and online attendants. There will be opportunities for discussion and input, so please use the microphone if possible when speaking. We are also live streaming this meeting on Facebook and recording it for anyone who is not available to be here tonight. Before we start with introductions, I want to take a quick minute to introduce the purpose and the goals of this meeting, which are to identify and introduce involved agencies and organizations and their roles, provide background information on the purpose and value of community wildfire protection plans, seek feedback on wildfire concerns, provide the opportunity for ongoing feedback, and identify what's next in the process. For introductions, we will start with our in-person attendance. Please introduce yourself and any agency you might be representing or your connection to the Glennallen community. If you have any questions, please save them for later in the meeting and we'll have time to address them then, and we'll go ahead and pass it. We'll start to my right. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm Mike Trimmer. I'm the fire management officer for the Valdez Copper River area. Work for the state Division of Forestry. And thank you all for joining us. There's not a whole lot of in-person participation tonight, but we will have this recorded and we'll put it out on our Facebook page for hopefully further observations.
Hello, my name is Andrew Coulter. I'm one of the wildland fire resource technicians up at Division of Forestry. I've been helping out with CWPP and getting this moving. Also working with a couple of different WUI grants throughout the years. So if you have any questions, most likely ask us and we'll get them to you.
And you feel comfortable introducing yourself on camera?
I'm the quiet.
Okay, and we have one, actually we have two in-person attendants here, and one of them stepped out of the room for a minute. So we're gonna go ahead and go with our online introductions.
For those of you that are online, if you can go ahead and find that raise your hand button, and if everyone would please raise their hand, then I will call on you. And once you've completed your introduction, if you could go ahead and lower your hand. So let's see. All right, Fabian.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Hi, my name is Fabian Kern. I am the DIA Alaska Regional Forester, and I am here to listen how the plan is going and to provide support for the native allottees.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Marnie Graham.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Marnie Graham. I'm the field manager with the BLM Glennallen field office, and just listening in to hear what people's thoughts are for what they'd like for their community as it relates to wildlife and fire protection planning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Jason Devich. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Technology. Good evening, everybody, and my apologies. I can't be with all of you there in Glennallen this evening. My name is Jason Devich. I'm the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve Fire Management Officer, here to help and contribute however we need to and support the DOF's lead here for CWPPs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Jason. Thomas St. Clair.
I'm waiting, see if it'll work.
We can see you and we got you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Anyway, Tom St. Clair, I'm in Fairbanks. I'm a fire management officer for Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'm kind of listening to see how this all goes and see how BI can support. We have some funding opportunities for native allotments and for tribal entities for fuels work, and we have jurisdictional responsibility for some of the native town sites and allotments. That's all.
Thank you so much for joining us, Thomas. Joe Bovey.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Joe Bovey. I work for Otna Incorporated, representing the corporation here tonight, and just really feel glad to be here and talk about springtime, summertime fire activity already. So it doesn't look like it out there now, but I guess we all know in probably 3 months we're going to be ramping up for springtime and fighting fires again. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. John Winters.
Yeah, good evening. I had a phone conversation earlier there with Mike Trimmer today, and we talked about Firewise and WUI grants, and so he invited me to attend this meeting. What I'm trying to do here is extend outreach to the Copper River and actually Tok area, Eastern Alaska, on a forest stewardship self-study guide that would be available for that is available for private property owners to download and work through to establish some kind of a management plan for their property, regardless of the size of their property. That includes creating defensible space on their forested land. So I sent a letter to Emily, I believe, and with a letter that just describes the link to access that, as well as a couple of, or at least one video that I've made on doing defensible space work around your house in the wintertime. So if there's time in this meeting or anybody has any questions about it, I'm available at this time to answer anything.
Thank you so much, John. And yes, we do have you. We're going to ask you to say a few things towards the end of our meeting, if possible. And I know a couple of other people have just joined on. So I have asked everyone, there is a raise your hand option in the Moores tab, or it may also say reactions. And if you just joined on, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and raising your hand, and then I will call on you. And then if you could please introduce yourself. Isaac, go ahead.
Hey, my name's Isaac Hull, fire management specialist, prescribed fire and fuels for the National Park Service in Fairbanks. Listening in with Jason this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isaac, for being here. So I know a few of you did not raise your hand. I am assuming that that is because you do not want to introduce yourself, and that's totally fine. If I could just ask everyone that's online right now, if you could go ahead and please type in the chat box your email address. And if you don't want to share that with everyone, that's totally fine. You can do a direct message, a private message straight to me. And I'm just trying to capture everyone's first and last name. So if your name on the screen here doesn't have your last name, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and typing that to me too with your email. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here with us tonight.
Hey, Emily, we have our other person walked in, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Wonderful.
Yep. Where's the microphone? You can just say your name and.
Hey, I'm Leah. Sorry, guys. Hey, I'm Leah. I live in Silver Springs, but I might be buying a property in Glennallen soon. So I came here to learn a little bit more about community wildfire protection plans.
Thanks for coming, Leah.
Yeah.
Does that conclude the in-house presentations?
Yes, yep, of everyone who wants to do an introduction. So we'll go ahead.
Awesome. So without further ado, we will dive into our presentation. Copper River Forestry's fire management area encompasses 21.5 million acres, and over 20 communities exist within this fire-dependent ecosystem. The Division of Forestry has statutory fire suppression responsibilities through agreements with the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, including native allotments. Planning and being prepared is our best tool to reduce the impact in the event of a wildfire.
Reviewing and updating Glennallen's 2009 Community Wildfire Protection Plan is all about pre-planning to prevent and reduce the impact of wildfire. The boreal forest is a fire-prone ecosystem, and when conditions are right, a small fire can grow very rapidly. The small dots in this picture are fire starts from 1940 until 2018, all of which were caught before they grew into large fires. However, being in the corridor, which we call the wildland urban interface, often referred to as the WUI, or the area where our homes and infrastructure are, just because they were caught small does not mean that they were not impactful. 2019 was an active fire season for us. We had multiple fire starts within our coverage area. The Tokiana and Chetislina fires were lightning caused in remote areas, and although they grew to be quite large, they did not directly threaten communities within the Copper River Basin. Yet they do show the fire potential that our area has. The Plutina River fire was a human-caused fire, and full suppression efforts were used on this fire due to its proximity and the continuous fuels between it and Copper Center. Statistically, more fire starts are human-caused, while higher amounts of acreage burned is caused by lightning ignitions. Human-caused fires tend to be more expensive and impactful as they are near communities and values that need protection. As our communities expand and populations grow, the challenges to suppression fires in the wildland urban interface continue. A couple statistics from our recent fire seasons. The 2019 fire season was the second most destructive season in Alaska's fire history. Of the 423 fires reported in the state protection areas, 251 were in the wildland urban interface areas of the state. The McKinley fire destroyed 57 homes and 82 other structures along the Parks Highway near Willow. The 2015 Sockeye fire destroyed 55 homes. About 80% of the population resides in communities at risk from wildfire. Defensible space is essential to improve your home's chance of surviving a wildfire. And one of the outcomes we hope to identify and enable through a community wildfire protection plan. Defensible space is a buffer created between buildings on your property and flammable vegetation that surrounds it and is necessary for firefighters to safely defend your property. Creating defensible space is often done through a program called FireWise. Examples of FireWising your property include removing any flammable materials touching and around your structure, also limiting trees and vegetation within 30 feet of your structure and from the 30 to 100-foot zone of your structure, thinning trees, pruning branches up at least 6 feet to limit fire spread from the ground into the trees and from tree to tree. FireWise materials also have suggestions for construction methods, materials, and maintenance suggestions for your house that reduce the chance of it catching fire in the event of blowing embers landing on it.
Communities identified to receive new community wildfire protection plans are the updated community wildfire protection plans are the Chittenden, Kennecott McCarthy, Glennallen, and Strelna areas. Communities identified, next slide. Communities identified to get new community wildfire protection plans are the Kenny Lake, including Willow Lake and Upper Tonsina, Copper Center, including Clutacah and Silver Springs, Taslina, Lake Louise, including Crosswind Lake and Tulsona Lake, Solana, Nebezna, and the Mendelton and Nelchina area. The Division of Forestry is working with the Bureau of Land Management Glennallen Field Office as a federal partner to complete the Copper River Basin's Community Wildfire Protection Plan through a grant. Community wildfire protection plans work directly with the National Fire Plan of 2000 and the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003. Both plans were created in response to increasingly devastating wildfire over the last couple decades, particularly in the Western United States. Through legislation, funding is available to address better management of fire-prone ecosystems where people live. This is commonly referred to as the Wildland-Urban Interface, or the WUI. A CWPP is a planning document for communities. Copper River Forestry is facilitating the process and will produce the final document. We are looking for input and collaboration with local organizations through meetings, gathering feedback from other land management agencies as the plan pertains to different land ownership. We also are looking for input and feedback from community members through survey participation and other outreach, such as community meetings. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is a potential funding source for tribal entities to implement goals outlined in the plan. Here tonight, we have Fabian Kern to talk with us further about funding opportunities through BIA. Fabian, do you want to take this time and talk about your funding opportunities? Or I guess Thomas St. Clair, I'm not sure who is going to talk to that.
This is Tom St. Clair can talk about it. Fabian could be a backup though if I screw anything up. Yeah, BIA has two sources of fundings. One isn't really for tribal entities, it's for that native allotments, which are individuals have native allotments, but the tribes can also apply for this reserve treaty rights lands funding, which is also fuels funding, but it is designated to be used on lands that the tribes have an interest in, and so they don't have to be any kind of lands that the tribes own. It could be native corporation, private, state, park service. or any other land as long as there's an agreement. So it's kind of a broad source of funding, but the key is that the tribes would have to have an interest and ask for the money in the RTRL. So two sources, one targeted towards the allotments and one targeted towards tribal interest. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. A community wildfire protection plan includes a community assessment that identifies values and risks, elements of community protection that are already in place, an action plan of measures that can be taken to reduce the threat and impact of wildfires, and focuses on creating defensible space around structures. These plans must include collaboration and community input. We cannot write community wildfire protection plans without community input. So how do community wildfire protection plans benefit your community? They empower the community to produce, they empower the community to be proactive in wildfire prevention and protection, confirm the importance of volunteer fire departments, and can back future funding efforts for them. These plans improve collaboration and effectiveness of local fire suppression resources and community preparedness. Once a CWPP is in place, funding sources such as the BIA or Wildland Urban Interface, often referred to again as WUIs, can be obtained to meet the goals identified in the plan.
The process of revising Glennallen's 2009 Community Wildfire Protection Plan involves reviewing the previous document to see what is still relevant and identifying what still needs to be addressed. We will look at previous hazardous fuel reductions and identify where retreatment is necessary and efforts that build off of previous work. In addition, public input on concerns and needs within the community will be included. And as you can see, we have a map up with some hazardous fuels reductions that were done in 2013. The map also shows properties that were assessed in FireWise to create defensible space. This was done through this was done by the Division of Forestry with the Wildland Urban Interface grant, which was possible to obtain because of the needs identified in the plan. And in addition, a shaded fuel break was also put in behind Terrace Drive to protect the neighborhood from the conditions of continuous forest to the north. And I'm going to let Mike Trimmer speak just a little bit on the history of the fuel break that is around Glennallen and some some plans to retreat it in the future.
Okay, so I began my career in forestry here in Pasadena in 1996. At that point, previous to that, there was already fuel break work being done. Most of it was done by the Pasadena Hot Shots, and it was work when they weren't higher priority fire assignments. It was just project work for them to work on and stay busy. Board firefighters are fairly dangerous, in my experience. But we've recognized the need to go back. We're down 25 years down the road and retreat that fuel break, and the majority of that lies on Otna land, and we do have funding secured to be able to do that, but just really in the initial phases of putting a plan together for that. I've had a little bit of discussion with Otna, with Joe Bovee and John Leonhardt there, and that's going to be ongoing. We hope to be able to start some of that this spring when conditions allow. A good chunk of that's going to be equipment, shear blading and whatnot. What that's going to look like is yet to be determined. Except we have the funding secured to be able to do that. And that's really what I could say right now about the Glennallen fuel break. And I would not, honestly, I wouldn't be too, dismayed about the lack of private individuals on this meeting. I was on the first one in 2009 here. It was me and Tom Kurth and Gary Mullen looking at each other. But we were able to, Glennallen's always been a hard community, and for whatever reason. Just not a lot of, it's really hard to get that. But I think with the surveys that we've mailed out, I don't know, Emily, if you can speak to that, how many responses we've had back from the Glennallen community addressing those concerns. But that we've also put out mass mailers, and we're getting most of our information, I would say, back from that at this point. So I'll continue working with Joe and and hope to be able to put a really good, solid, plan together in place to retreat that Glennallen fuel break. I don't know, Joe, do you have any input on that?
No, I would say that we are looking forward to retreating the original fire fuel break around Glennallen. It's in need of it. And like you mentioned, Mike, it's been 30 years or a long time. It's grown up pretty much. You can't even walk around out there anymore. And I would just have to say, from an Otna standpoint, we're totally supportive of the whole program, the CWPs, the Firewise, the WUIs, everything that goes along with it, because like it or not, I mean, we're all in the same boat essentially. So we kind of got to work together, whether we like each other or not. Sometimes it's a different story, but Otna is fully supportive of the whole programs we're trying to implement here this year, throughout the next couple of years, actually.
And I think there's really, multiple objectives, Joe, there. I think, just besides the fire and the solid fire break and access again, I think you'll realize some habitat improvements and new moose browse and things of that nature. So as we move forward with these projects, we're going to try to combine our efforts to not just, the priority would be Firewise on private property and around primary residence. But as we put in fuel breaks, potential fuel breaks, and larger scale things, we hope to realize more than one objective, either in biomass utilization or habitat enhancement.
And Mike, I just wanted to say that we will touch on the surveys and the results later in the presentation.
Okay, good.
So for the folks who are looking at this map and maybe less familiar with the Glennallen area, the fuel break is denoted as the blue line that goes around Glennallen on the map. And fuel breaks are really valuable in event of a fire because they break up the fuel continuity, with the result being a lessening of the fire intensity, which slows the spread, and it allows access for fire suppression resources to engage the fire. We've got a question. Go ahead, Leah.
Do you know what milepost the fuel break is at?
So, can you answer that exactly?
Well, it's kind of part of this, and I need to talk to Joe further about it. I think we've had some initial discussions in our initial discussion, but most of it is not visible from the right of ways. If you go down the Moose Creek Road, you can kind of get onto it. That's the easiest access point. But what never happened, there was two pieces of it, both the north and south. That box that was never connected to the Richardson Highway. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Joe, but I think that would be one of the objectives, and to finalize those pieces. And I'm not really sure why it never was completed, but that would be a goal that I would want to see. And then it'd be clearly visible when you drive north of Glennallen. It just a mile or south, right, half a mile south of Glennallen, you should be able to see straight shots.
And I think some of the concerns at the time too were just allowing, like off-road vehicle access and things like that. I know that parts of the fuel break are used in the wintertime for snow machine and dog sled trails. But that, we also don't want to open up the lands for overuse and too easy of access, where they could be damaged. So I think that might have been some of the concerns also. Fabian, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to say that it was probably to reduce access onto Otna lands is why it wasn't the line wasn't created all the way to the highway. So you kind of covered that.
Yep, thank you though for your input. And Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I got a question here too. So, excuse me. So it's kind of a two-part question. So I have had people call me over the last couple of years and things like that, and they're doing thinnings, lemming around their house and stuff like that. Does the Glennallen dump charge for bringing brush and stuff there? And if not, I think it would be helpful because we used to have kind of a site out there by Gary Fisher's spot, 180 or 181, whatever it is out there. And it was a good spot. And I think more people would be proactive with taking some of that brush, from their brushing, clearing jobs and stuff like that, put it all in one spot, then burn it like this time of the year versus everybody trying to clean up their yard, stuff like that in the spring. And everybody's, instead of having one bigger bonfire in the winter, we have, maybe 20, 30, 40 little bonfires all across the area in the spring and summer when it's most hazardous. So just an option, something to think about here tonight, I guess, and talk about in the future.
And that was, Joe, that was included in the Glennallen WUI grant. That was actually, which that never really actually happened. But yes, that was the point, was try to develop a community site that, folks could haul brush to into one good safe burning area and kind of reduce the number of, people burning in their yard, brush in their yards and try to reduce the number of those human starts in critical suppression areas.
And it also is one of the questions on our survey. The question asks if you have difficulties discarding brush that may be created from, fuel reductions on your property. So it is something that we're sampling the community to see what their input is on that, and definitely looking for ways to address how to dispose of all the fuels that might be created, or are there biomass energy type ways to convert, this waste into something useful. So it's definitely something that we're thinking about. So for folks who are in the room, we have a couple copies if you're interested in seeing the 2009 Glennallen CWPP. We're not going to spend too much time on it. For folks who are online, I have the link listed in the corner of the slide, or I believe Emily is going to put it where you should be able to follow it from the chat box right to a new window if you're interested in looking at it. Basically, a new risk assessment will be done on the community and a new mitigation plan made to determine solutions to the needs and risks that are identified within the community. This slide shows the 2009 mitigation plan. Although some of these objectives are still relevant, the revised plan will reflect updated needs and concerns. The revised plan will also include a new action plan. But I am going to go over what was listed just briefly, just go over the main objectives that were listed in the 2009 plan. And remember, a lot of it does focus on creating that defensible space that is really key to protecting your property in event of a fire or a spreading fire. So what was listed in 2009, objective 1, involve the public in implementation of FireWise principles and home fire prevention, and that including supporting and educating the public in the use of FireWise programs and educating the public on safe burning practices. Objective 2, reduce the risk of wildfire through site-specific reductions. Objective 3 is reduce the accumulation of fuels by developing a biomass utilization program. Objective 4, reduce the risk of wildfire escape by improving the effectiveness of fire suppression resources. And 5, clear and reduce fuels along roads with poor access to ensure egress during a wildfire incident and to strengthen it as a fire barrier. So currently, we have 2 surveys available, which can be accessed online, and we did do a mass mail out through the whole Copper Basin. Up to this point, we've received 20 back, and this is from the Glennallen area, concerning 20 of our fire safety and preparedness surveys, and 18 surveys back concerning firewood use. However, region-wide, we've received 359 surveys. These surveys allow us to compile information on the type of outreach and programs that will benefit the community, and in addition, what your wildfire concerns are. Some of the questions we're looking for in the survey are if you consider your home defensible in the event of a wildfire. Of the 20 Glennallen folks who answered this question, a little more than half believe that they have adequate defensible space around their property. Another question inquires about access to your property, which we commonly refer to as ingress and egress, and it concerns both you getting in or out and fire personnel being able to get in with their apparatuses. From this question, it shows that about 60% of the people who answered it feel that they have good access to their property, but of course we're going to be focusing on the people who don't identify as needing, access improvements to their property. Another question rates what people's biggest wildfire concerns are. From the folks who responded to this question, I'm not going to read the percents. You can just kind of see by the bar graph what fell into higher categories of concern, but I'll just read the topics that people identified as concerning. And the first one, the print's small, so in case you can't see it in the room, the first one is the access to your property, which we were talking about before. The next one is if you have an unimproved road and minimal or no signage on your road. The next one, which nobody answered, is if your place is too remote to be reached. The next question, or the next thing that you could possibly choose, is if there's poor communication, whether it be radio, repeater, or cell phone communication in your area. The highest thing that people showed concern on was lack of a water source nearby. And then the next highest thing that folks showed concern on was lack of a community well. People indicated having defensible space around their property as a concern. Again, there's a specific question concerning road signage. That is a large concern for emergency responders. Tourists, hunters, and recreational users potentially present a threat if fire is not handled respectfully. It looks like about 20% of folks said that beetle-killed trees were a concern. 5% expressed concern that they have difficulty or there's no disposal sites. We're looking also into trying to support volunteer fire departments with identifying any training or resource needs that they may need And that's the last one was equipment. So training, volunteer fire department training and equipment needs is also something that we want to identify within the plans. So, go ahead.
Well, just to tag on to that, this is the first time, as long as I can remember, that the Glen Ridge Fire Department has submitted a what's called a VFA grant, Volunteer Fire Assistance Grant. So I'm really excited for that. Been working pretty closely with the Glen Ridge and trying to bring more of these, more of the volunteer fire departments. There's actually several this year that it's their first one they've ever done. So that's really good progress to try to help equip those guys a little better with wildland gear, et cetera, to assist us when we need them.
So I'd just like to pause for a minute and see if any of our in-person or online participants have any questions up to this point.
So how do the wildland firefighters, how would they address lack of water sources nearby? What is something you could do to address that?
Okay, so a question that we just had was how wildland firefighters address lack of a close water source. And basically, there's multiple ways that we can address that if we're in a fire suppression effort. One of them is by utilization of our volunteer fire departments. They have large apparatuses, tenders that 5,000, even up to 10,000 gallon tenders, and we can utilize them to set up folded tanks and get those folded tanks to be filled and refilled by the tenders. We also have access to aerial resources, helicopters with water dropping capabilities, single engine air tankers or seats, and then larger retardant type dropping aircraft. So all of those are resources that are available to us.
So having a community wildfire protection plan to help fund VFD and everything that would be beneficial.
Yeah. So the comment was that the community wildfire protection plan, just in case you can't hear, since we don't have a microphone over there, could be beneficial to identifying any of those concerns and then addressing them. And of course, making those cooperative agreements with our volunteer fire departments too, so that they know that they're a valuable resource when these incidents happen.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Any other online questions? I'm just gonna kind of shuffle through, see if I see any hands.
Yep.
Don't I-
Jenny, I
Go
got a
ahead.
question. I didn't raise my hand though.
Yeah, no.
So I would like to hear, because this is a survey done by the community. I would like to hear what the experts have to say as their greatest safety concerns from the questions here.
That's you.
Well, Joe, my number one priority as an incident commander on fires in the urban interface would be number one, it's defensible space. And that just gives us an opportunity to get potentially a crown fire down to the ground where we can do something with it, we can manage it. I would say secondly, the fuel breaks do the similar thing. Although, I've often wondered whether the Glennallen fuel break would just prevent, what side of that fuel break is that fire going to start on, right? But either way, it gives us a foothold and a fighting chance to. But those two things to me are priorities. We're surrounded by creeks and rivers, and maybe having equipment set up and available for public use, like a water wagon type thing, when they are going to burn pile in their yard. We've looked at some of those options too. But but to me, the number one is defensible space. That's the number one thing that when a community is being overrun by fire, they're looking at me going, what are you gonna do? And I often just want to say, what have you been doing about it? It's your private property. That's the best thing folks can do. And you know, we can set up like these cost share agreements, which we did in Glennallen with the WUI grant after the 2009 CWPP. We also did it in Kennecott and McCarthy, and that was highly successful. Where we would come out and assess your property, and John Winters can probably speak more to this when his turn comes up. And we had a metric in place where we would assign a dollar value to what we thought that it would take to firewise your property, and then turn it over to, it's a cost share. The landowner had 3 options at that point, and if they took action on their own and did the work themselves or had their buddy do it or whatnot, they would get actual a refund check for 50% of that assigned dollar value. And so that to me is, we can incentivize people to take action on their own private property. I think that's the first priority. And that continues to be the kind of the main thread in all these communities. Glennallen is the last one. This is the last meeting of phase 1. And that's been the overwhelming response, is just, you know, firewise on individual property. And I think that's the best bang for the buck any day.
You know, I might also add on to some of the things that Mike said, is that one of the outcomes that we hope to also identify within the community wildfire protection plans are areas of safety zones and evacuation spots. So places that people can go where they'll be safe, or they'll be able to get updated information if a large scale wildfire is occurring. Again, looking at those evacuation routes and the ingress and egress out of neighborhoods and people's driveways is also a big thing that we're going to be looking at and trying to identify where concerns are. Public safety is always our #1 goal in event of a fire.
We do have a comment online. Glenn says, I agree with Mike Trimmer. Continuing to access the local needs of VFD in regards to equipment, training should be a priority. I would also suggest looking at VFD brush trucks status along with personnel training to do the rapid response necessary during a time when DOF is occupied elsewhere. And Glenn, if you want to add anything more, feel free to unmute yourself.
That's kind of the effort. That's the point behind those VFA grants, the volunteer fire assistant grants. That's also federal money that comes to the state, and it gets divvied out to all the volunteer fire departments and the borough fire departments as well, quite frankly. So just engagement and participation in what's already available to better equip those folks, because you're right. I mean, when we get busy and we have 15 starts in a day, we kind of got to prioritize and triage, and we rely heavily on the volunteer fire departments. And depending on, some of them have decent brush trucks and that kind of gear, and some of them do not. And so that's kind of been my focus with those chiefs, trying to get them to help us help them with at least equipment and supplies. And then always we're encouraging them to participate in our wildland training. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible. This year, we even have a virtual option statewide. So anything we can do to encourage participation, involvement in the community members in their volunteer fire department, which are, there's not many people. Jenny can speak to this. She's an active member on one of the fire departments, and that's another, that would be another good goal, would be encourage local participation in joining their local fire department and getting involved and being able to help in time of need.
And our hope is that, you know, when we identify these needs in a plan, then we can sort of work towards solution and goals through our action plan that can address the needs that are identified. Does anyone have a comment? I'm not sure if I'm hearing a little bit of jumping on.
Yeah, Emily, this is Glenn Holt. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, Mike's right on. You know, the thing is that, you know, along with assessing fire breaks and fuel lines and just the status of those, because obviously they always grow. It's good to update that plan from 2009. The needs of fire departments might also need to be monitored or reassessed and make sure that they do have the brush trucks, because actually it is a triage situation. So, and it's never been better or easier for VFD people to get wildland fire training. Mike's exactly right. So, you know, looking at that, in fact, I'm going to do that myself. I certainly can't pass the physical part anymore, but the training that shows us to do what to do is a great idea. So I'm just going to defer to what you all are discussing, but Mike's right on with that in my opinion.
I have a hard time believing you can't pass the pack test, Glenn.
Well, you know, we've worked together years ago, but you know, maybe I could just do it a little slower, buddy.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so, you know, I really appreciate the discussion and the input that we're receiving. And again, if anyone here in attendance in the room or online has any input based off of these, any input at all, really, but we have these sort of guiding categories of emergency preparedness, which includes things like proper road signage and community water access, community outreach and education, types of programs that you think would benefit you. Fuel reductions, which concerns areas of high use or fuel loading, and treatment and disposal. I just want to, again, I want to pause and open up if anyone has anything that they'd like to, ideas they'd like to contribute at this point. Just gonna take a quick look online. Emily, if you see anyone online too, because I don't have all our windows opened up in the chat box, feel free to welcome them to speak. I don't see any hands up right now.
I don't see anyone either. Just so you guys know what our idea with this is for anyone that's online, anyone that's in person, to just, you know, if you have some ideas for emergency preparedness or community outreach, any of these categories, and then I'm taking notes as people are talking. So if you have any ideas or input on any of these topics, please feel free to share. John Winters, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as community or preparedness, I guess the thing, you know, again, that I'd like to encourage is people, you know, developing a sense of self, you know, ownership of their property and self-reliance. And the self-study guide contains a FireWise risk rating form that's been designed to be a little bit more people-oriented. And it gives the people the ability to download that along with the self-study guide and look at their own place and see, you know, what the risk rating is and why. What elements is there about their home construction, storage practices, as well as just the vegetation. So whether that particular form, risk rating form, is used, or anything else that's already been developed and circulated in the Copper River area, is is a good positive start towards self-sufficiency. I'm sure Mike and other agencies strive. Here on the Kenai Peninsula, I work for the Forestry Stewardship Program on the Kenai Peninsula, based out of basically Homer, and I put together firewall. I apply for and occasionally get grants to provide defensible space cost sharing to people. That won't always happen, or that may not happen forever in the future. And I think that's one point that has to somehow, if there's a way that message can get out there, that people need to be motivated to take care of their property, because things like these fuel breaks, as good as they are, may not work. And their property is their defensible space is their last line of defense. And as great of an incentive as it is, the money for cost sharing just may not happen. We'll try to get it, but it just may not happen. There will just come a time when, for whatever reason, the feds could say, hey, Alaska, you've had plenty, we're gonna be putting the money somewhere else. Example, I put in for, not to drag things on too long, but that selection process for how a state gets some of these grant proposals occurs, that can change real quickly. I put in for one program for a grant proposal to provide cost sharing for people to do a variety besides defensible space. It was going to be thinning, pruning, little reforestation projects to create a little bit more resilient multi-species forests on their properties. And I was informed after that process that the federal government just had, just a day or two before that, decided that that particular program would not have cost sharing go directly to property owners. So I had to rewrite that application.
Was that a WUI, Forest Service? John?
No, it was it was laser. It was the LSR program.
Okay.
And so, I guess the point being is, if there's any way that it can be done, and people that live there in the Glennallen area, just as I do around the Kenai, can come up with some way to motivate people to get an interest in their own property protection, that that forest that they have is a very special place, and they need to be motivated to take care of it and protect it as best they can. And if there's cost sharing, great, but that property in the end is so special that they're willing to do whatever they can afford, time wise or money wise, to make it more defensible, whatever they can do. And so the self-study guide provides some things that they can do, and they to, in a cost-effective manner, protect their places, or do other things for the benefit of their for the benefit of their forested land. So that's what I've got.
Thanks, John. And, living in a more rural area of Alaska, I just couldn't agree with you more on the importance of that self-sustainably, or, we do have resources available, but you do have to take protection into your own hands and be proactive.
Just another really quick point too is, as we speak, there are 2 stewardship foresters with the Division of Forestry Stewardship Program in the state working now. They're going to be picking up, the hiring a 3rd one there to cover Fairbanks. But I basically cover with our program manager in Palmer, who has, a very broad program level focus. He doesn't always have, too much time to get out in the, into the communities, especially the far-reaching communities like Glennallen. Same with the person in Fairbanks. So I've gone up to the Matsu Valley and helped with doing stewardship planning and site visits there in, from Talkeetna all the way down to Homer. So the point I'm making here is that that program delivery, we're from our end, we're trying to reach out to these communities to have that. But the best thing that people can do is gather as much information and knowledge as they can about forests and apply that as best they can for their properties.
And John, feel free in the chat box to write any contact information, links or anything that you want to share where people can find more information or get in touch with you.
Will do.
We'll share it. We'll put it on our Facebook Firewise page too.
Yep, and we do have a resource slide later that has some information on it also. Another thing, which of course we're using the surveys to get this input, but again, if there's anyone right now in the meeting who has any discussion or wants to identify any hazards of concern right now, now's a chance to speak up. Some of the things that have come up before are dealing with dry grass in the spring before green up happens, the issues of junk cars and hazmat that accumulates around people's houses, and communication dead zones. So we'll see if anyone in the room has any comments or anyone online. And I don't see any hands up, so we're gonna go ahead and move on. So this area is the Glennallen Community Wildfire Protection Plan planning area. It includes the corridor of values at risk and the bordering adjacent lands, and also any potential areas of cultural significance. It defines the wildland urban interface, and this is where the risk assessment for the Glennallen community is going to be performed within this planning area. And then it'll be reflected in the goals and objectives of Glennallen's revised CWPP. This is different from the 2009 CWPP. We've expanded it. The original planning area only included the area within the actual fuel break of Glennallen. So we've expanded it out to just about mile 182 on the Glen Highway, and then north to include the Gulkana Airport. And then of course, these plans, there is no gappage in the area of the Copper River Basin area that we are looking at for the 10 plans that we are updating and writing. So there's no area that they basically butt up against each other. Any questions or comments on this? Okay.
So again, we cannot stress how important it is that we hear from you. Please complete our 2 5-minute surveys. The web and QR codes are listed here. If you ever have any questions, feel free to contact me, Emily, via email or phone. My information is listed. However, if you would like me to directly send it to you, please go ahead and type your name and email again in the chat box. And for those of you in person, you can give your information to Jenny and I can reach out to you. For more information and resources regarding community wildfire protection plans, as well as FireWise, you can visit the State of Alaska website and search CWPP or FireWise in their search engine, or you can simply Google Alaska FireWise and Alaska CWPP. And as we've already said, John Winters is online with us tonight, and he can talk further about the Forest Stewardship Program and FireWise opportunities for private landowners. And I know we've kind of talked a lot about that already. However, John, if you have anything else that you would like to add, please go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself at this time.
Okay, thank you. I could take a quick attempt here. I'm really not the best in the world at doing this Zoom Teams thing, but I could try sharing my screen. and showing what this self-study guide looks like. Can I try that there, or is that possible?
Yeah, so you should be able to do that, Jenny. If you want to stop sharing, then you should see that share screen button at the, like the middle bottom of your screen in the Zoom link.
Yep, I've just clicked it.
And then it should show like all the windows that you have open, and you can click on the window that you want to share.
Okay, because right now I'm seeing, okay, there was my desktop. I'm trying to,
Is it the
Stewardship.
web link that you sent to me earlier that you want to share?
it is, right now I've clicked on the screen that I think is a self-study guide, yet it's on a Microsoft Edge thing. So let's see what happens. Is it visible now?
We can
Yeah, we
see
got
it.
Is it right now on my, well, let's see. On my, is it clear in your monitor? Can you see it? Because I'm looking at a separate monitor. It looks kind of bleached and hazy, but you can see it clearly?
Yeah,
What
we
it
can
looks
see
like?
it just fine.
Okay, what this basically is a fillable form. I tried to keep this thing under, this thing being this self-study guide is a PDF document created by Adobe Acrobat, fillable. It was just the first thing that popped into my cabeza for, some kind of a fillable form. And so what it does is you go through here, and the first thing is you can go to these different places and type in, your owner name. If you wanted to actually fill this out, you could type in your the owner name, the nearest community, and these other things that you see on here. This self-study guide was, so it started out as a self-planning form. The only problem that I was running into is there was just not a lot of people out there in the non-forestry agency community that knew what forest stewardship means. So it was just better to have something that was more that people could relate to more quickly, like self-study guide. So going through this, just real quickly here, the self-study guide also contains links as well as some QR codes, so that if you chose to print this thing out and do it in pen, or however way you wanted to do it, you can use those QR codes to access other websites. In this case, that was a QR code that would get you to the stewardship webpage. So looking through this, a person could use this to draft a forest stewardship plan for their property. That is one use that could happen. When we do stewardship plans on a property, if I go out to a property in Glennallen or wherever, and I talk to a property owner, I will be asking them a number of questions about what's their interests and different things about their property. I'm already looking, I'm surveying, reconning the property, getting an idea of the tree species, the species mix, and of course the big issues with their property. Do they got beetle kill? Is their house completely inundated with a bunch of black spruce or not? Do they have a monoculture of trees, or do they have species? Anyway, there's those kind of things that are done there. And so I gathered that information up. Getting back to this form, a property owner could go through, and through these check boxes here, check on characteristics of their property. Right now, for example, does everybody see the forest description page 2? It's these symbologies of different types of forest stands, and then these click boxes. So you could look at so if you're a property owner, you have this thing either in your phone, a tablet, or on a computer, you're traipsing around your property, you could have this thing open and you could click and say, I think there's a single stand of trees on the property with one species or a mix of species. And then getting down to the species, you could look at, well, what species do you have? If you're not sure, you can click on right here on this information button, and it'll take you to the common forest species of Alaska. So you can read about white spruce, what it looks like, characteristics real quickly, and say, okay, yeah, I must have white spruce, and gee, I bet I got 50%. The trees on my property, probably 50% are those. Just swag it. And you can put this information together, and so you get a picture. You paint a picture for yourself and for possibly a stewardship forester of what you have for a forest on your property. Now you go through the significant page is these forest conditions that you see me scrolling to now. It's page 9. Do you have a high tree density? Do you have insects and diseases, etc.? So you can go through and check that. Plus, if there's just some other issues not addressed in these check boxes, this self-study guide has places where you can type in a narrative. And forestry goals. Is your goals to have fire protection? Is it to mitigate insects and diseases? You got a bark beetle outbreak or an ips beetle outbreak or something going on. Do you want to utilize wood in some different ways? Do you want to have a timber sale, or do you want to, yield firewood or whatever? And then also just the option for people to put in some other forest management goal that they may have for their property that again is not addressed on here, such as permaculture or something like that. They can put that in there. Here's the defensible space fire section, page 11, where you can do kind of a general overview of your place. There's this diagram that I put together of a humble little place out in the woods, and you just kind of check these different things that might be on your property, like spruce trees within 100 feet of the house, dead trees near your house, branches close to the ground, dense trees, etc. And then this is the risk rating, the FireWise risk rating form. Actually, I don't have that in this particular one here, but I do have the fire protection. Oh, let's see, risk rating question. Yes, I did. Okay, on this risk, how many, Mike, did you do a risk rating questionnaire like this, or risk rating assessment form before? Or you guys actively do them in Glennallen?
We have a form that we did for just on private property when we were doing those cost share. We had something similar, not anywhere near this complicated, but just taking into the main things were fuel type, slope, access, egress,
Yeah.
kind of those points.
This is a risk rating. This part right here is the risk rating form that there was a risk rating assessment. They called it the FireWise assessment or risk rating form that was put together on the Kenai, I believe. And it had been used for years and years and years before my time in stewardship. And it was, if you were an agency person going to a property, it was about 4 pages, and it was check boxes, and it came up with a relative score, a risk rating. And you just presented that, you just showed that to the property owner, saying that, well, you're in a high fire danger risk, and it's because you had some pretty high risk marks for having a lot of structures close together, a asphalt shingle roof, whatever, your power lines had no egress or no right of way clearing around power lines. You got a 2-track getting to your house. These various factors, and so you could show that and explain that to them. Whereas with this thing, people could look through their property and just kind of start checking what they have, and this thing will it'll start to do it'll start to tally up what they've got here when they go through this thing, and that's what they have for a risk rating if they want to have, if fire protection is in fact one of their goals. I have taken this FireWise risk rating section and pulled it out, and I have it available now as a standalone document so that people could just do that or just work with it without the stewardship thing. But the important thing, the reason that I have it in here is because I consider fire protection as just one of, could be several goals that property owners could have for their property and probably should have for their property. So that's pretty much, what I've got with this. It goes, there's next section is insect and disease mitigation, and it has a link to go to the common forest diseases and insects of Alaska, a link that can take people there. And then it gets into a reforestation section on just kind of basics of planting and growing trees. So that's pretty much what this self-study guide is and what people could use statewide. Well, I'd have to probably do some work, tweak the thing to get it more applicable to Southeast Alaska, but it is relevant to, mainland Alaska, i.e. South Central and the interior. So
Yeah, it
that's
looks real
that
good,
it
John.
then. Okay.
Can we share that on our Facebook Firewise community page?
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea that I had is I have that link that I think I sent to Emily, and that could be posted there. In fact, that letter, I'm not sure if I did, but I thought I sent a letter. But it could be done. You could present it any way, copy and paste I had about 2-paragraph letter there that I sent, but that could be put in the introduction on your Facebook posting. And by all means, yeah, use this link address here that I provided in the chat to, guide people to that self-study guide. And there's also a video that I've made on creating defensible space in the winter months, which offers the advantages that I think Joe had described, and some other people had described, that burning slash and doing that kind of disposal is in the winter time offers the advantages of not having to mess around with that in the spring months or the summer months when you're competing against high fire danger. And I think that the fire management would love people for that. In high fire danger. I don't know, are bark beetles flaring up again in the Copper River? Spruce beetles?
Yeah, they're definitely active.
Okay, one of the big important things, because being here on the Kenai, people were going just crazy doing firewise and defensible space. And, it's like Maytime, and okay, the snow's gone, so they're out there jumping around, pruning, whacking away on thick, pruning spruce trees and thinning and cutting infested trees, which is about exactly when you do not want to be doing that, because it promotes bark beetle spread. They're in their flight, and they smell those wounded trees and they go nuts. So the winter time is the time to really be doing the pruning, the months with R's. That's when that's typically the time of the year that you really want to get to doing your pruning and thinning is going to be, get after it in like September on, after the beetle flight, when those bugs are dormant, and you take those newly infested trees and you cut them and buck them and get them all to where they're, getting them drying as fast as you can, so that ideally you could burn the things up in that year. But whatever, don't be doing this cutting and stuff like that in the spring months. So that's another thing. And I wasn't going to mention that until somebody was saying about, a couple of remarks that I heard about bark beetles, and it was making me wonder if that's flaring up again in Copper River. And so that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, I think something contributing to that, John, is the lack of access, especially on state land, to standing dead. And so if you're gonna harvest firewood on state land in Copper River right now, you're pretty much forced to cut green wood and let it sit for a couple of years. And that's where I'm seeing the beetle infestation, are literally in people's yards, in their piles of green wood that they've cut and they're waiting to season for firewood. You can stand out there, you can hear the beetles in there.
Yeah,
and so we're contributing a little bit just to just the necessity of people being forced to cut and season green wood, and that's just prime beetle habitat.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's potentially a situation where an action such as defensible space, very well meaning, in fact very necessary, though, can trigger another problem. Here on the Kenai, it was quite drastic. Like in Cooper Landing, where I was working, it was really, I mean, I guess one of the suggestions I would make would be, if you were to start doing some more defensible space grants, sub-grants on private properties, have some pretty clear stipulations that says that you want to see thinning, pruning, tree cutting, live tree cutting suspended during those beetle flight months, which is May-ish through July. And they can go crazy doing it in, say, August and on, because I would, you might want to double check, but I think the beetle flights, it would be safe to say the beetle flights would probably be over in that Copper River basin in September, where they're dormant.
Good point.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely a consideration that we want to keep in mind and promote the best practices as we move forward. So thank you for all the input and that really valuable tool that you showed us.
Okay, very good. So I'll go ahead and stop the screen share. And I'm mute.
Thanks, John. Emily, can you see our screen back up?
I can, yes.
Okay. Okay, so as we reach the end of the presentation and meeting, we want to leave you what to expect, what is next. The Division of Forestry will attend meetings with local organizations to expand on needs and priorities. We are looking to continue to get community input through the survey process or contacting us directly. As revisions take place, another public meeting will be scheduled to seek input on plan revision. And Glennallen may want to consider becoming a nationally recognized FireWise community. This designation is a way for communities to show pride in their fire mitigation efforts. There are only 2 other communities within the state of Alaska with this status, one of them being the McCarthy-Kennecott community. Becoming a FireWise community involves a community organization or tribal entity filling out an application, the community showing progress towards achieving the goals outlined in the plan, and holding 1 community FireWise day per year. Emily, did you have anything else before we conclude the meeting?
So my closing statement is that this meeting concludes our phase 1 of our community wildfire protection plan process. And we're going to be moving into phase 2, which will consist of identifying hazardous fuels, way to mitigate them, risk assessments, and needs identified from communities, and create a glide path to produce our final document in phase 3. We value any input and encourage your participation through completing our 2 surveys. And please feel free to reach out to me at any time you have any questions or if you have further input. And we just want to thank you again for joining us tonight.
Yep, thanks everyone, and thanks to the online or the our in-person folks who showed up also, and of course our online participants.
So
All
if
right,
anyone
good night,
has any further comments or questions, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and share them now. Otherwise, we will end the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks for inviting me. It was my pleasure to be here. Have a good night.